I'm Scott Duncan-Fernandez with Somos and esrito. I'm here with Jenny Irizary, our poetry editor, Armando Rendon, our executive editor, and we're here to interview Sasha Reiter on his new book, Sensory Overload. Also,
hello.
Also with us is Pedro Gonados, the translator, and Marisa Russo, the publisher. We're here to interview Sasha Reiter on his new book, Sensory Overload. Let me
Hello.
turn down this Facebook. I can't hear myself. I'm gonna go ahead and read their interviews and let you know about these people a bit, and then I'll turn it over to Marisa if she's okay with that, or Marisa.
Yes.
Sasha Reiter was born in New York City in 1996. He grew up in the Bronx, where as the son of an Argentinian father and a Peruvian mother, he experienced firsthand the metaphorical otherness of being both Latino and Jewish. He received his BA in English Literature and Creative Writing from Binghamton University in 2018. Pedro Gonados is a poet and novelist born in Lima, Peru in 1955. He has lived in the United States, Europe, and the Caribbean. Presently, he lives in his native country. He is president of Vallejo sin Fronteras Instituto, dedicated to the study of Cesar Vallejo's works. And Marisa Russo is an editor at Nueva York Poetry Press and is the publisher of Sensory Overload. And would like to say a few words, and I'll turn it over to Marisa.
Yes, hello. I'm Marisa Russo, and my few words because we want to hear Sasha today with this wonderful book. And we're welcoming you to Nueva York Poetry Press, Sasha. We're very proud to have you in our family. So, I just want to tell you that you can read Sasha's reviews about the book in Nueva York Poetry Review, and as well in Nueva York Poetry Press in our page. But thanks to this wonderful translation by Pedro Granados, we can have this bilingual book with us in our collection, Cruzando el Agua, dedicated to Sylvia Plath. All our collections in Nueva York Poetry Press are dedicated to Latin American women, but this one in particular, because it's Spanish, English to Spanish, is dedicated to Sylvia Plath.
Hey.
Thanks for inviting me to this presentation. Sasha, it's a pleasure to meet you too.
Yes, thank you. So nice to finally get to see your face and meet you. I really appreciate those words. They're very sweet. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Marisa. I think we're open it. Why don't we open with Jenny? Perhaps you can start off asking Sasha about sensory overload.
Okay, sure. So in For the Damaged, you bring up the question of whether it is better to be lonely than alone. And also, can equally damaged parts make a whole? What do you think now, during a time when there has been so much public discussion of loneliness and isolation?
Thank you. That's a great question. Yeah, I think my views on loneliness have definitely shifted a little bit. I think as everyone's have, we've all become so kind of accustomed to it in some way or another. Yeah, I think, interestingly enough, that poem was, I had written it while in a relationship that I think I was starting to sort of feel the end of and feeling a little not, I was sort of grappling with those feelings. And I think when it ended up getting published, it was like after that relationship had ended, and that happened during the pandemic. So I think for me, having to like sort of come out of a space of being with somebody all the time to like being so isolated in like moving back home with my parents and being stuck. It was interesting. I think it taught me a little bit about the privilege that I had, that I was able to come back to my parents, that I had them to take care of me, that I had this time to not be completely alone, like so many people I know are right now. But even being with family and loved ones, it's a tough time. And I don't know if I feel the same way I did when I wrote the poem about whether or not equally damaged parts are really that disastrous together. I mean, maybe they are, but I'm hopeful and open to just getting to meet people again and be face to face with people at this point.
Speaking of loneliness, I mean, I kind of got many times throughout reading your collection that there is a void between the inner self and the outer world. Like in several of the poems, I think like there is I think the titular story, of course, is the titular poem, sensory overload. There's lots of media that's coming in. There's lots of and even in the story, the poem, like why I love New York. I mean, there's the outer world is filthy. It's not just New York, but but far as like it's filthy. It's there's a disconnect between it and the inner self. I mean, do you see like the poetry is trying to connect or find solution from what the inner loneliness to this outer world, which seems to at the same time inhibit to create this loneliness?
Yeah, thanks so much. That's definitely, yeah, I think poetry for me is definitely like a tool that I'm hoping to use to either build that bridge for myself or explore what a bridge like that could look like between the inner self and this outer world that sometimes can be very overwhelming or overloading or perverse. And yeah, I think especially maybe like it's a reflection of the way that I think where my head has been at, and I think maybe a lot of other people's heads have been at these past few years have been just getting tougher and tougher for a lot of people. And I think we're seeing a lot of ugliness that we maybe were looking away from before, and it's almost like harder and harder to look away from. And I think that, maybe instead of looking away from the ugliness, there's a way to connect that to something inside, and the way that we're all feeling about it, and what we, how that affects our personal relationships too. And I'm hoping that poetry can serve as a bridge, not just my poetry, but anyone's poetry, is it's kind of like an arm that they're reaching out from somewhere inside into the outer world and grabbing at something that hopefully they do grab at, and something hopefully grabs back.
That makes me think of, I think the poem, The Prophecy About Us. We have kind of a question here, like what is the role of eco-poetics in the midst of climate change / collapse, unfortunately?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question, because that is something that I personally feel very strongly about. Even if it's not as present or prevalent in my work as I want it to be, it's something I'm constantly trying to put more in my poetry. And I think it's because I do feel like it's kind of, there's been a lot of discussion about this in some of the classes I've been taking in Sarah Lawrence College, where I'm doing my graduate program right now. And I've been to some talks about it too that were wonderful. And I think a lot of the consensus is that it's a poet's job or duty in some sense, because our way of helping would be to dive into that subject and to sort of communicate with the world, what our fears and anxieties about this sort of eco demise that we're experiencing. And you see it in like television and movies. You see like dystopian futures that like emulate the fears that we have right now. And more, I think we're seeing like shortages of resources leading to the human demise, or and in real life we're seeing it, and we're seeing the sea level rise and can take away people's homes. And I just think the more and more people write about that, and the more and more that it becomes normalized to hear about it, the less people sound crazy for saying the world is ending, and the more people will take it seriously. And I think poetry can do a big part of that, like a lot of other art mediums. And so, yeah, I definitely feel like it's a bit of our role and duty as poets to tackle that as well as humans.
Denny, do you have something to ask? I'll turn it to you.
I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was. So one of the things that brought to mind, because I think that you write about being born at the end, is that you bring up in Benched stories about your birth that you heard. And you say that I strangled myself with my own umbilical cord, that the doctor said I was born with my eyes open and I didn't cry. When did people start to tell you these stories, and what do they mean to you?
Um, I think I've been hearing that story for a long time from, I think first maybe my mother when I was very young. Um, but it's a story that I think it seemed interesting, so it was one that she liked to tell, and I'm sure I like to tell too. Um, and I think I kind of like to cling to that. I enjoyed clinging to that in other moments to sort of try and make sense of how I came to be the way I am, or why it is that sometimes I feel like I'm benched and watching other people sort of run through the world by me. And I guess maybe I'm hoping other benched people can also uh, connect with that, and that sort of desire to find some reason to explain away who we are and why we are just not, or what makes us feel different from someone else, because sometimes we really do want a reason, just something to not feel wrong, I guess. And I think that's I think maybe that's kind of what that story has meant for me for a while, and something I was sort of reckoning with in that poem.
We'll probably talk about the poem "Do I Come from the Bronx?" 'Cause I think that's one that Jenny and I connected with quite a lot, and we have we could talk about it a bit.
Sure.
Didn't want the interview to end without addressing it. We have a question about this poem illustrates constantly simultaneously belonging and not belonging, and what would you like the readers to take away from this poem who don't know the limitations on belonging to a group or belonging to community without distrust?
Mm. Yeah, I think that topic in general is so complicated for people who have complicated cultures, and grew up feeling isolated by the communities that they supposedly belong to, or who want to belong to communities they just don't feel fully a part of, or they feel there's something in the way, and that to me, definitely, I feel like that's something that happened to me, and I imagine it happens to a lot of people who um, have sort of maybe conflicting cultures, who are mixed, or just have a complicated family tree and history. But I think I was also wanting to sort of address what it felt like to just grow up that way in an actual neighborhood that felt like that. And, I think that that's sort of an exploration that I wanted to keep having with um, my relationship to the Bronx and to where I was raised and to what that means and what my the different aspects of my culture mean, and the privilege that comes along with that, which is something that I think I'm exploring a lot more now in like the poetry I'm writing right now. And I think it came as a natural step of this sort of exploration of what it meant for me to I guess to have sort of one foot in a culture that is maybe not completely mine, and at the same time feels like it should be, and like I and the complicated feelings that come with that, and the privilege of being able to have that, but of being able to step back into a neighborhood and not think about uh, a lot of those things that I addressed, that I didn't have to grow up thinking about, and I didn't grow up thinking about.
I might say one thing that also interested me about the poem is you talk about there's a line about not being allowed in your best friend's house.
Mm.
And that's something I experience as well. And often I've heard other Latinos, Mexicanos, whatever, said this is a common thing. You're not allowed in your white friend's house often, and you don't see it expressed so much all the time in poetry, literature, whatnot. This is one of the few times I know it's kind of a hurtful thing to write about, and it's I'm just, to me, I mean, I just want to express that this is one of the few times actually seen that people actually have it there on the page.
Mm.
So.
Yeah, I think there's thank you for saying that you connect with these things. I think growing up, it definitely stuck with me a lot. Some of those experiences I had in elementary school, especially, those to me still seem like the most poignant and strange experiences. And maybe it's because kids are just saying what they've heard and what they think they're supposed to be saying, and oftentimes it's really misinformed, and so I had friends that I didn't want me coming over because they felt their neighborhood was not nice and they didn't want me to see that, or friends that didn't want people coming over because it was because these barriers really exist. And, as a kid, you can't really understand it sometimes. And, you wonder why you can't go to someone's house, or why, someone's parents maybe are looking at you or a friend in a weird way. And all those experiences, just trying to make sense of them as a kid is so strange and difficult. And so I think a lot of us grow up with this sort of skewed perspective of who we are and and how we're supposed to relate to the world and to each other.
Do you think like having so basically you're talking about identity crisis, do you think that it's kind of a forever condition, or is this like something that just a situational condition?
I mean, I think in part it always has to be, it's always going to be a forever condition in some aspect. I think it's important to like recognize that and not deny that this is an experience that people have, or that these are experiences people have. But I have hope that that as people, we grow constantly, not just generationally, which you can also see big changes socially, but I think just, right in the here and now, in this, we can take everything that happens in politics and in the world, like the pandemic, and we can use them all as experiences to broaden our perspectives. And we can read poetry and read, nonfiction and all these people's experiences, and hopefully they can help us recognize that, I don't know, that things can change. And just learning about it for yourself too, I think can help you. I mean, as I'm not quite there yet, but I would love to be the kind of father that, is able to teach these things to my kids in a way that they get it, quickly at a young age, and they don't feel, or if they do feel, all that hatred, that they can make something out of that positive in the world. I'm
I
still
think
trying to
also
learn.
pardon me. I mean the representation and the witnessing that you're providing is also something there, because I mean, like I was saying, this is something you don't always see like just written about or like or even believed.
Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned to you earlier, but there was that comment that you had gave me at the end of a reading in another interview, in an earlier interview, when I about a similar kind of poem dealing with those types of boundaries. And I think at the end you said like, oh, that's me, and that definitely made me. It was just nice to hear that like it is reaching other people who feel this way, and I think the representation is very important and it's very important to me that I can put something into the world that I didn't have, that I didn't get to experience when I was younger, that I think maybe would have really helped me.
So this is changing topics a little bit, but you write a lot about sort of multiple generations of a family struggling with depression, and seeing things in yourself, like behaviors that you saw in your parents as a child. And that seems like that's also relevant here to what you're talking about. What would you like to say about that? Or what were the after effects of trying to grapple with this in your writing?
Yeah, that's very interesting. There's so many angles to like unpack that idea about writing about something generational, about depression or any kind of mental illness, or in general just writing about people you love, and thinking about your relationship to them, and then putting that out in the world. Because you mentioned after effects. I think one of the effects of just writing it itself it's definitely an exploratory process for me. And although I don't want to make any statements about my parents or who they are, I think that any kid knows that they can't help but grow into their parents to some extent, and we all see it happening, and I think it usually catches people off guard. And it's a kind of scary thing, because I think as much as we love our parents, they're our parents, they taught us. So we're learning from them constantly. We're also learning a lot about ourselves through our parents and who we want to be. And while I think we learn a lot about who we want to be, like directly from our parents in relationship to our parents in like a growing close way in the very beginning of life, then you get the teenage years where it's your relationship to your parents is kind of founded on distancing yourself and how that turns you into you. So I think, yeah, I guess I think I think during the process of doing that, I learned a lot about myself, and I think why I thought I was the way I was, kind of grasping again onto those things and reasons to explain myself. And they help and they're nice, but I think it's also like, I think it was also kind of good to be able to move away from that too and see, you know, I appreciate my parents, and my parents are fantastic. They're the best. They're very sweet and are there for me almost too much, but that's not a complaint at all. But at the same time, I think I can kind of like not completely close that door, but like move more in the direction of who I want to be now, and not just who I am because of my parents, whether from some congenital thing or just what we learn from our parents. I mean, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your use of pop songs and pop bands, and I think it's in was it Blonde Redhead and
Yeah,
what was the other one that was like in this collection? Oh,
maybe Highly Suspect.
Highly Suspect. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So I mean, you I can't recall the songs, but like in your poetry, you said like after, maybe you talk about like because part of the a lot of sensory overload, you have like media coming in, and it's like it's not good media of ads, and you know, but like these are like good media. These are like pop songs, and maybe talk about that, about like incorporating that into your art.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I love talking about that because well, first of all, yeah, I think that there is I guess a lot of media has made its way into this collection. I think it's really on a lot of our minds, the way that it sort of infects our lives in both positive and negative and overwhelming ways. As far as as music goes for me, it's always been a very, very big influence on my work, whether it's alt rock or pop or lo-fi chill wave, those kinds of I think just rhythm and music is so important to all kinds of writing and poetry especially, but you know, whether it's something very literary like a poem or a ballad or another kind of maybe more literary kind of musical piece, or it's a pop song from an indie band, I think that it's, you know, influence can or inspiration can come from anywhere, and in my opinion, it should come from anywhere and everywhere, because I think all genres have a way of bleeding into each other and lending to each other. And although I think it's very important to learn from and pay homage to people who are working your craft, I also think it's important to look into other crafts as well. And I think you can bring stuff from there that just totally, I don't know, change the way that at least for me, it totally changes the way that I think about poetry and I look at poetry when I'm writing, especially after a song. I think For the Damaged is literally sort of in conversation with a song from Blonde Redhead, which is from the same title, For the Damaged. And in that song, there some of the lyrics are sort of grappling with this idea of you know, of equally damaged parts being good for each other, and maybe, you know, the speakers like reaching out to someone saying, you don't have to be alone, don't be a fool, we're both equally damaged, you know, we can be together. And I just found that such an exciting concept that I found in just a pop song, that it's almost, the rhythm is more important, I think, at first for me, was in that song than the lyrics. That's the way Blonde Redhead is. They're like very their music is so unique, I think, that like sometimes the lyrics take a back seat. But once I read them, I was like, no, I have to respond to this, because I don't know if I agree with that, but I like that they're saying that, because I'm not sure if I agree with it.
I have to confess, I didn't hear. I listened to them as I reread your poem today, and I haven't heard them before. They're really, yeah, I'm a fan now.
Oh wow, I'm so happy to be able to pass them along. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're fantastic live too.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think you answered everything I had about that. It is, but I do wonder, do you see like the jumping off point? I mean, or like you hear this song, or does the poetry help you figure out what you like about it, or it's just a jumping off point?
Yeah, definitely. I think my relationship to the song really definitely grew after engaging with it in like responding to it and writing a poem for it. Sort of, I think it allowed me to take a different kind of step into that poem. I mean, into that song, and also into the imaginary world that the world that is in my imagination, that is like the world of the writers of the song uh anytime I sort of do that with music, I think I'm like sort of entering this pretend space of conversation with them, um or of trying to understand them and having them understand me, even if they never read my work.
Do you have something to add, Jenny?
Well, I was going to say, speaking of the influence of pop culture during the pandemic, have you found yourself rewatching shows, watching new shows, and have those had any influence in your writing?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's definitely been a lot more time for television, and in the same vein of the last question, and in looking at like literary and non-literary works, I think that there's, for me at least, there's a lot of room in my work for influence from TV shows or series like and even video games. I know lately, because a lot of the poems that came out in this collection were like either right before COVID or were revised during COVID, so during the pandemic. So um, I think more now, right now, is where I'm starting to see a lot of the influence in the writing that I'm doing now. And like from show, there's one poem I wrote recently that I know is was inspired by like the opening cinematic for the season 3 of Westworld, and also the last episode of BoJack Horseman, which is like an animated show on Netflix, like dark humor, dark comedy. But so they're both like sort of one being an acclaimed show, but still like an HBO series, and the other probably maybe more niche television show. But I definitely am happy to draw my inspiration from anywhere I get it, and then it's nice to see it find its way in my work.
I think it's pretty funny that like during a lockdown and a pandemic, it's the sensory overload is what
Yeah.
because of the media, and that's what's really hitting
Right.
like becomes the center, which I think everyone can really emphasize, like sympathize with that.
Thanks. Yeah, I definitely feel I have never been able to find it again. And I don't know if I'm going to do it justice, but there was this commercial I saw for the army, and I think it was the only one that ever made me think, okay, I see what you're going, where you're going. It was this um it was just this, I think, man walking surrounded by people passing him, and everybody had these like I think they were holographic screens surrounding, like all around them, and different pop-ups and ads and things like that. And it looked like the future, but it felt like today. And there was, I think, like a holograph of the man himself like came out at him, and like I can't remember exactly what it was saying, but it was very overwhelming. And I think the ad was is this you? Do you feel this way? And like here, like the army was offering like the U.S. Army was offering like a path of freedom from that through, I guess, the military. But what I really took from that was, yes, that is me, and I feel like that's everyone right now, or so many people right now. And how is this? How did they capture that so accurately, and how can we escape that?
So I just want to there's a question from Carlota Caulfield, actually asking me something I was going to ask as well. Would you please talk about your experience working with Pedro Granados in the translation into Spanish of Sensory Overload?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the work that Pedro has done for me. We've worked together in the past. I've translated his work, and it is really exciting to have him translating mine. I think it's really a great thing when poets can, especially from across the barrier of languages, to reach out and come together to make something special and help share something special with other people. It was really I really enjoy working with Pedro in particular. I think that him and I both have that connection from being bilingual, and also I think our poetry both can sometimes dip into more lyrical places and then come out of left field into something a little more narrative. So it's nice having somebody who understands that voice sort of take it into another language.
Hey, Pedro, would you like to speak to your experience on translating this collection? Oh, let me have to unmute you. You're muted. I don't think he knows he's muted.
Pedro, can you hear us? Well, these are the.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry. I want to share a very short words for this occasion, because of course I was expecting this answer. Let me copy, and after that let me to put in the chat. If the chat works anyway. What second, please?
Sure thing.
I am in Lima. Don't forget that. No, I am a little far.
I might mention that we got like Pedro's in Lima, Somos Esrito in the Bay Area, and Sasha is in New York. I'm not quite sure where Marisa is. She is New York as well. Okay.
Manhattan, yes.
Manhattan. Okay, we're all around today.
Okay, I wrote this. Sasha Reiter's poems are very welcome. Sasha Reiter's poems are interstitial. They catalyze between reality and the interpretation of it, but we must take advantage of the fact that there is reality in them, from where each of us, in the long run, little by little becomes purely innocent, absolved of all guilt and all punishment. Don't be afraid to lose anything here, except perhaps the interpretations. Everything is to be gained.
Thank you so much.
Then, in other words, the anecdota, the anecdota, the souvenirs in the poem, the family, the school, probably the routine, of the quotidian life, is less important than the powers to create reality inside the poem. That is the point. And this is the mark of a very great poet for the future.
Thank you so much, Granados.
Something like this.
Thank you, Pedro.
So I was going to suggest in another 5 minutes, we'll turn it over to Sasha and Pedro to perform their poetry. I was going to ask if maybe Armando, who is there, if you'd like to add anything here in the last few minutes. Are you there, Armando?
Yes, I am, and I've been enjoying the conversation. I would ask a question of Sasha as a young man. He a young man, I'm an old man. What he expects to learn in the future, what area of life, or does he expect to explore as a poet that drives him even now to put words on paper or on the computer? That makes sense, Sasha?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. Well, right now I'm it's interesting. I think in the pandemic, at first I struggled a lot to write, to have the motivation to write or even read for a little while. I sort of almost didn't want to turn more into myself than I already had to. And then something sort of opened up, maybe partly because I'm in a program right now that's forcing me to sort of be generative, and that's really nice. But I found that I really would like to write more into identity. Is something I think I've been doing a lot of, but I want to approach it a little differently. I want to write into what it means to well, into a lot more of the detail and the like nitty gritty of things that of these different sort of facets of who we are that we pull apart at a young age, and then we sort of hide some of them or become some ways that we need to become. And I sort of want to go back in time to those moments and see how that happens and why, and maybe how we can put some of those things back together. But I also really want to start writing more socially too. I have explored some of these, so I explored the relationships between different cultures and being within different cultures in the past, and I want to continue to do that. But I think I would like to, or I am sort of writing into that in a way that comes from maybe a more educated place about myself, and a place that sees different priorities and things that are important right now in the world. And I definitely would love to be a part of all of the important historical movements that are occurring right now, and get to pay homage and play my part in my writing. If that's eco poetry or something, or finding a way to connect to I mean, to something completely out of genre, even maybe. I've also been taking a class on I took some classes on screenwriting as well. So that's something else that I've been experimenting with and exploring. And I think that, as I said before, melting genres together and taking influence from other genres and maybe leaping away from mine and learning what I can from another genre and giving to that craft as well is something I'm very interested in and continuing to experiment with and explore.
That's really interesting to me because I think in a way the poet is always looking for whoops. Oh no.
I still hear and see you.
Okay.
You are connected.
My TV. I was trying to say identity seems to be a matter of poetry in itself. A poet is always trying to find his own role or her own role in society, and very often other people try to tell you what who you are, and regardless of what you think of yourself. So is that what one of the things you're talking about in terms of identity?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I at least personally feel that I'm very aware of all those moments sort of growing up where people tell you who you are, and then the people and the person you sort of become, or the people you become because of that, or not necessarily because of that, but in maybe an attempt to become what people tell you are, that you think you should be. I think there's a lot of pieces of ourselves we leave behind, and I'm really interested in finding those pieces and things that we change our shape to fit into the world more evenly or easier. And I think there's so many aspects of ourselves that we live our lives denying, and I'm not interested in continuing to deny those parts of myself or those things that I think other people, are still denying. I think the world is a bit of a rough place for a lot of people still that don't feel comfortable being themselves. And as someone who feels a part of that, I want to continue to explore that for my sake and the sake of everyone else who's in that boat.
I like to cut in there because what you just talked about, it brings me to your poem in page 24. I ran into the little girl in therapy. Could you read that poem for us?
Sure. Did you ask me if I would read it?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Because it illustrates what you just said.
You said, sorry, it was on page 20?
24.
Okay, 24. Thank you. All right. This is, I ran into the little girl in therapy. I know you saw me last night. You ran out so fast, I might have believed myself a monster. I won't beg you to let me out. Just listen to why you locked me away. In this dusty cellar where bony mice eat through cardboard and plastic. Maybe you thought I would die down here, that I would shrivel up like a plant without light. But I am the sun, and you cast yourself into shadow. The day you came back different, when you looked at me in that mirror with evading eyes, with shame, and you smashed my glass so I would never age. I'm not mad, you were small then, but not anymore. At least let me tell you why. Do you remember what they said about me? Your friends, their parents? Does it really matter what they said? Was it really them who said it? Or was it you? Was their love sweeter than mine? Was it greater than dolls, prettier than dresses, than the long hair they begged you to cut? Was it more important than having a vagina? You don't have to come back down. Just look in the mirror. Past your beard, past your eyes, your skin. I am not a bad dream. I am that little girl.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Good.
With that, why don't we turn it over to Sasha and Pedro? I'll try to see if I can do the magic here and just to make it zoom on them and the video just be the two of them, and then we'll come back and say goodbye at the hour. Let me see if I can actually do what I'm saying. Oh, there we go. I disappeared. Can you? No. Okay. Can the other guys? I'm trying to figure out. I thought I knew how to do this. I'm sorry. If we could remove. No. Well, I think if you guys just go ahead and start. I don't want to like run out of time here. Stop video. Ooh, nope. Sorry about that, Armando.
Okay.
It'll be okay. Why don't you guys? I'll put it on the speaker view, and you guys can go ahead and read, and I'll mute myself.
Sure. Pedro, I'll start with the wolf. That's okay.
Okay, great. You start in English. Okay. Go ahead.
Sure. All right. The wolf. Son, I'm afraid you're like me. Knees kissing the ground, I ask that you be spared, but every man cut from our cankered cloth is condemned. The water that makes up more than half of your body is boiling, burning the bedlam that howls and kicks alive in your chest. It will push at your skin, try to break free. Don't let it out through your mouth. Build a cell from the flesh of your heart, keep it docile. Out in the night, its headlight eyes will render friends still as deer, swerve and drive them away like I did your mother. Learn to be quiet, ingest and keep it down until only you can see it. When people love you from afar, do what I do, absorb your ambition, consume the commotion in the corners of your mind, devour all devotion, put down your passion, wipe clean your teeth, and swallow the wolf.
Okay. El lobo. Hijo, temo que eres como yo, con las rodillas besando el suelo. Rogué que te perdonaran, pero cada hombre cortado de nuestra ulcerosa tela está condenado. El agua que conforma tu cuerpo es más de la mitad. Hierve, queme el alboroto que aúlla y patea, con vida en tu pecho. Empujará contra tu piel, intentará liberarse. No permitas que salga por tu boca. Construye una célula de la carne de tu corazón, manténla dócil. Afuera por la noche, sus ojos de faro revelarán amigos quietos como ciervos. Los desviarán y alejarán como yo a tu madre. Aprende a estar en silencio, ingiere y mantén la calma hasta que solo tú puedas verlo. Cuando la gente te ame desde lejos, haz lo que yo hago. Refrena tu pasión, consume la hecatombe en los rincones de tu mente, devora toda devoción, apaga tu deseo, limpia tus dientes y trágate al lobo.
Thank you. I think for the next one, do you want to do I come from the Bronx?
Yes,
Should
go ahead.
do I come from the Bronx? If the Bronx is a gradient of love stories told in different tongues, then South Riverdale and Kingsbridge were where those tongues wrapped themselves around me. But Riverdale is not the Bronx, he says. Kingsbridge is bachata bursting through your window at 2 a.m. It's brown cops crying in the space between their heart and their hip, brown boys bringing knives to school because bullies hate fags, a thin gray dude waiting under the shade of tanned brick, offering me sketch cocaine. At 15, me buying a homeless man that cocaine for $10. It's the creep following that 12-year-old girl whistling softly about her ass. It's a cold coquito on a hot summer day, outstretched blocks of families mixing together, singing and dancing all night despite the gutters, because of the gutters. It's gutters that fill up with fire hydrant water to turn a place of pain into a water park. It's children and mommies and titis who wouldn't call it a place of pain. I grew up at the bottom of Riverdale, on the top of the hill that melts into Kingsbridge. I grew up in white parks, with silent nights enveloped by Jewish families, increasingly annoyed by brown mothers like mine moving in, where people from Kingsbridge worked hard to have their kids grow up. Asking my best friend why he wouldn't let me go over to his house, watching rabbis talk down to Jews too poor to afford community membership. Maybe Riverdale is already not the Bronx, but I've spent nights dancing to that 2 a.m. bachata booming from a parked car. I've tasted the sweetness of those coquitos and the saltwater tears of mothers who pray at night to an indifferent, secretly American God who keeps the bridge gates closed. Maybe I am not from the Bronx. Maybe I am the unintentional child of cultural lovemaking, so full of rape and cariño that I get to draw the lines of where my Bronx ends and where it begins.
Okay. Soy del Bronx. Si el Bronx es una pendiente de historias de amor contadas en lenguas diferentes, entonces South Riverdale a Kingsbridge eran donde aquellas lenguas se envolvieron a mi alrededor. Pero Riverdale no es Bronx, dice él. Kingsbridge es una bachata que irrumpe por tu ventana a las 2 a.m. Policías morenos llorando en el espacio entre su corazón y su cadera. Muchachos morenos que traen cuchillos a la escuela porque los matones odian a los maricas. Un tipo flaco y gris acechando bajo la sombra de ladrillos tostados, ofreciéndome paquetitos de cocaína. A los 15, yo comprándole a un desamparado cocaína por 10. Es el depravado que consigue a esa niña de 12 años, silbándole suavemente a su trasero. Es un coquito frío en un caluroso día de verano, alargadas cuadras de familias que se mezclan, cantando y bailando toda la noche a pesar de las canaletas, debido a las canaletas que se llenan con el agua de los grifos de incendio para trocar un lugar de dolor en un parque acuático. Son los niños, las mamás y las titís quienes no llamarían un lugar de dolor. Crecí al fondo de Riverdale, en la cima de la colina que se derrite en Kingsbridge. Crecí en parques blancos, con noches silenciosas, envueltas por familias judías, cada vez más enojadas con aquellas madres morenas, como la mía, que allí se mudan, donde la gente de Kingsbridge trabajó duro para que sus hijos crecieran, preguntándole a mi mejor amigo por qué no me dejaba visitar su casa, observando a los rabinos hablar con desprecio a los judíos, demasiado pobres como para pagar la membresía de la comunidad. Quizá Riverdale ya no es el Bronx, pero he pasado noches bailando al compás de esa bachata de las 2 a.m., retumbando desde un automóvil estacionado. He probado la dulzura de esos coquitos y las lágrimas de agua salada de las madres que rezan de noche a un Dios indiferente, secretamente estadounidense, quien mantiene cerradas las puertas del puente. Quizás no soy del Bronx, tal vez soy el hijo involuntario de un acto de amor cultural tan lleno de violación y cariño que me permite marcar las líneas de dónde termina mi Bronx y de dónde comienza.
Gracias.
De nada.
Would you want to do the rain next?
If you want, it's okay for me.
All right, 42. Okay. The rain. Mother watches us and cries. I follow her tears as they drown the gutters on the roof of the house next door. Gallons drop down like H-bombs, smacking against the tar, against the footsteps, against the memories, erasing traces of tears and laughter. In the damp and humid aftermath, only the tangible remains. People look to their feet, swallow themselves in tarps as cars drift over newborn creeks and hurry home to hide. I used to love the sound of her wails in the sky, and outside, under her veil, I was alone with her and free. But today, I am one of them. Her sadness is my prison. I cower inside. I watch words sink to the bottom of the splattered coffin as I cling to what is left of my soul.
Okay. La lluvia. Madre nos mira y llora. Sigo sus lágrimas mientras ellas ahogan las canaletas del techo de la casa de al lado. En galones caen como bombas H, dando manotazos contra el alquitrán, contra los pasos, contra los recuerdos, borrando rastros de lágrimas y risa. En la humedad y sus secuelas húmedas, solo lo tangible permanece. La gente mira sus pies, se tragan en sus lonas, mientras los autos flotan a la deriva sobre los arroyos recién nacidos y se dan prisa para refugiarse en sus casas. A mí me encantaba el sonido de sus lamentos en el cielo y afuera, bajo su velo, estaba solo con ella y libre, pero hoy en día soy uno de ellos, su tristeza es mi cárcel, me arrugo por dentro, observo las palabras, se hunden hasta el fondo de un ataúd salpicado, mientras me aferro a lo que queda de mi alma.
Gracias.
You're welcome.
Do you want to do for the damage? I don't know how much how much time we have
Yes.
left, Scott, for more.
Scott?
One or two more would be great.
Okay,
One
sure.
Depending how
Okay,
long.
good.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, how about so I'll start with for the damage, and that's not too long.
Okay.
All right. For the damaged. After Blonde Redhead. I don't write about the future, though I fantasize. I fantasize that fantasies don't dissipate. Do we need ourselves? Could each other be enough? At some point in time, I wanted to believe this, that unconditional was a sensible word, that love is enough, and it is better to be lonely than alone. That equally damaged parts could make a whole, a new whole, almost void of perfection, perfect in its resistance to break. Are we stronger together? Or do weak hands build a weak bridge? What happens if we both slip off into the river? Do we grasp at each other for help? Too much water in my eyes, lungs to see that you're drowning too. And if I got strong, if you learned how to swim, I'm afraid of what my future carries, of who is there with me or without.
Para los dañados, a la manera de Blonde Redhead. No escribo sobre el futuro, fantaseo más bien, fantaseo que las fantasías no se disipan. Nos necesitamos a nosotros mismos. ¿Podría el uno al otro ser suficiente? En algún momento quise creer esto, que incondicional era una palabra sensata, que el amor es suficiente y que estar solitario mejor que estar solo, que partes dañadas por igual podrían hacer un todo, un nuevo tipo de todo, casi vacío de perfección, perfecto en su resistencia a romperse. ¿Somos más fuertes juntos? ¿O las manos débiles construyen un puente débil? ¿Qué sucede si ambos resbalamos en caída al río? ¿Nos aferramos uno al otro para ayudarnos? Demasiada agua en mis ojos. pulmones para ver que también te estás ahogando, y si me hiciera fuerte, si aprendieras a nadar, tengo miedo de lo que lleva el futuro, de quién está allí conmigo o sin mí.
If we have time for one more, I have another short one. All right. If Pedro, if you want to do prophecy about God, that one's.
I am not ready. I don't have the point.
Sí, por supuesto. ¿Tienes otro? Do you have one more?
No.
Oh, well, I mean,
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Which one do you want to read? I could read it.
Sure. I would.
Sure. Good.
If okay. Cool. It's on page 70, prophecy about God. Thank you,
Okay.
Marisa.
Oh, it will be a pleasure.
All right. Prophecy about God. When I grip the straight razor to peel off my beard, to see what they meant when they said we were made in her image, my hand hesitates. Unready, I turn the blade to hairless skin, milking distraction. I plug my throat with potent drugs and dream that she will come back, that she will see how death has its tendon hooked in the spot she left, a spot I'm not sure even she could fill again. Teach us how to grab death back, to use it. We want to be fallen angels who rise up from the ashes to become something no longer avian, no longer dead. Teach us how to breathe again. I watch for her, entangled puffs of smoke, in the pupil of my cat's eye, in dreams and moments, in my mother. I pray like I used to, when I thought God was spelt with a capital G. I pray in the pandemonium that formed a council in my brain. The first time I saw my face, my body, I remember her hands looked like mine.
Profecía acerca de Dios. Cuando agarro la navaja de barbero para pelarme la barba, para ver qué decían, qué querían decir cuando dijeron que fuimos creados a imagen de ella, mi mano vacila. Desprevenido, hago girar la navaja a la piel sin pelo, exprimiendo distracción, atoro mi garganta con drogas potentes y sueño que ella volverá, que ella verá cómo la muerte tiene su tendón enganchado en el punto que dejó un punto que no estoy seguro si incluso ella podría volver a llenar. Enséñanos cómo apresar a la muerte otra vez, a usarla. Queremos ser ángeles caídos que se alzan de las cenizas para convertirse en algo ya no alado, ya no muerto. Enséñanos a respirar de nuevo. La espero entre enredados soplos de humo, en la pupila de ojo de mi gata, en sueños y momentos, en mi madre. Rezo como solía hacerlo cuando pensaba que Dios se deletreaba Dios con mayúscula. Rezo en el pandemonio que formó la asamblea en mi cerebro. Cuando vi mi cara, mi cuerpo por primera vez, recuerdo que las manos de ella se parecían a las mías.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much for stepping in, Marisa.
Thank you.
So that was great. The work always transforms when you hear it aloud, and this is really good. So I want to thank everyone who's watching right now. This video will be up on Somos Esrito's website, somosinscrito.com, and our YouTube page. Thank you to Sasha Reiter, Marisa Russo, Pedro Gonados, and to Armando and Jenny. And I guess that's it. Thanks for everyone. I see you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.